Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Episode 324, after an Arizona Cardinals win, is fantastic. I'm your host, Jess Root from CarsWire.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from the USA Today, NFL Wire. And my co-host is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from the SB Nation family of sites, and also one of the hosts of the Original Draft Breakdown podcast. Seth, I can't believe it. The Cardinals not only picked up a win, they picked up a win in holy cow, great. Like, it was dominant from start to finish. The NFC West looks unbeatable. The AFC West is unbeaten, so we've got officially in the NFL the best coast over here. But how was it to get some actual, real, meaningful football this weekend? Because doesn't it feel back to normal? I know not everything is back to normal, but it feels like that, at least for the fans.
Yeah, and it was it was a fun game for Cardinals fans. I think Tennessee fans wishes there were still COVID restrictions, just based on the play of their team. But as Cardinals fans, we have to look at week one, and I think you are completely excited with the fact that the Cardinals don't just look like a good team. They look like a team that can compete. I mean, there's a lot of issues with Tennessee right now that we can talk about, that we can potentially, take away some of the shine off this fantastic Cardinals win. But why do that? I mean, let's be realistic. Everybody expected the Cardinals to get thrashed in this game.
Really? That's the thing. So we both thought it was going to be we both thought it would be high scoring, sort of a back and forth game. But we thought the Cardinals were going to come out on top. But it felt like, and that was even a lot of the local media here were like, oh, they're going to get completely blasted. And that wasn't the case at all. So, well, actually, let's go ahead. What we have on tap for this show, we're going to talk about, we're kind of lead with this. What was good from the game? We're going to talk about, maybe there's a few concerns. We'll talk about the playing time and snap counts, what surprises there were, and then we'll look ahead to their week 2 game as they have their home opener against the Minnesota Vikings. So let's talk about the good in this game. And I don't know if I've seen, probably since 2015, a better game start to finish from this team.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is you look at it, it really was start to finish. I mean, they kicked off and got a 3-and-out. And, well, okay, here we go. Rondale Moore has a nice little punt return. Nothing huge, just a nice little. And then they march down the field, efficiently and effectively. They have a couple penalties. I was, a little frustrated with the penalty calls, especially allowing them to get into a groove offensively. But that's something Cliff's going to have to figure out. I mean, at this point, he's got to figure out how he's going to change personnel groups, because defensive coaches are learning that if you slow play it, the refs will allow your substitutes to really just walk onto the field, and then the refs will hold up the snap, which to me is a joke, but that's the NFL. They allow it to happen, so you can only do so much with it. And so he's going to have to figure out how to deal with that so he doesn't waste timeouts early, doesn't get, delay of game penalties or those situations, but they still got a field goal out of it. And then they come back and Chandler Jones was just an animal.
Oh my gosh.
He gets the strip sack. and then all of a sudden you think it's again worst case scenario. You get a penalty, you get an inefficient second down call, and then it's third down. And you kind of did you not kind of go, here we go again?
Yeah, it kind of felt like that's like red zone problems.
Yeah, and then Kyler does what Kyler can do, and makes that gets time and is able to loft up a pass, and DeAndre Hopkins makes a catch that, let's be honest, only DeAndre Hopkins can make. And then it just felt like from there everything just clicked, and they were just able to roll on both sides of the ball, and that they were the team that everybody should have been talking about how efficient their offense was going to be and how dangerous their offense was going to be. And they should have been the team that was talked about their, defensive front seven additions and how much of a difference they were going to make. Because we heard all about Tennessee, the addition of Julio Jones was just going to completely change the face of that offense. The addition of Bud Dupree and the health of Harold Landry is just going to really change that Tennessee defense. And the national media especially, but even the local media, they didn't really believe the change that J.J. Watt and a healthy Chandler Jones were going to bring to this defense, and the efficiency of adding a Rondell Moore and getting Christian Kirk lined up in the slot consistently was going to bring. And I don't think that those things can be overstated.
Well, it's really interesting. So the biggest surprise for me was just, and it wasn't just one drive, it was two, it was three, it was 4 drives to start the game that defense was just, wow. It was like, you honestly couldn't ask for it better, because how those drives went is they kept getting 3 and outs. They kept getting 3 and outs, time after time after time after time. Let me pull up the possessions, and they got. I think it was. Let me see. I think it was. It would have been 4 straight 3 and outs, except for the fact that. So it went.
They ran a trick.
They ran a punt play. So first drive, 3 and out. Second drive, 2 plays and the fumble. Third drive, 3 and out. Fourth drive, they got a 3 and out and only got the fake punt. But then right after they got the first down on punt, they got a 3 and out again. So it was essentially they had 4 straight drives where they didn't allow a first down. The defense didn't allow the first. Special teams allowed a first down. So they went 4 consecutive possessions without allowing a first down. And it was incredible just what this defense was doing. And that was the thing. So when we looked at that game, we felt that the Tennessee defense would struggle against the Cardinals offense. The Cardinals offense, we believe, is good and efficient and productive. The Tennessee defense was no good last year. While they made some improvements, it didn't to me look like it was significant. And so all I thought is that the defense would just need to make 1 or 2 stops, or basically one more stop than the Titans get from the Cardinals, and then they would win that game. But the Cardinals defense was just really, it clicked at every level. They were getting penetration on the interior. They held up in the interior. They got the Chandler Jones play. They were athletic and fast from the linebackers. The cornerbacks were physical. There were no mistakes in the secondary, and they were sure tackling. It was as if this is what, if Vance Joseph could draw something up, it was like executed to perfection.
Yeah, and you mentioned the corners. They played extremely well, but you mentioned one thing, especially their physicality. The physicality they brought. I know that's something that a lot of fans have been wanting to see, especially, with Patrick Peterson and the fact that he's basically had become a liability as a run defender. You saw teams go after him in the screen game, in the sweep game. Outside runs were directed at Patrick Peterson. Still a good cover corner. I don't think anybody would really dispute that, but he had become, less of a talent at cover corner and become, a complete liability in the run game. And when you're not a lockdown corner, you better bring something. And I think that's the thing with Marco Wilson and Byron Murphy. Murph looked great, so I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. And I thought Wilson flashed extremely well in this game as for his first game. However, they played a very physical brand of football. They both were willing tacklers. In the run game, they both, were physical with Julio Jones when they were matched up, which is something that you have to do. He's still one of the freakiest players in the NFL. The only touchdown they gave up in the air was
it was garbage time.
And it was an odd matchup to have Jalen Thompson on
right.
AJ Brown. I didn't understand that, and I thought that was unfair to Jalen, to do that. But that being said, when we're nitpicking about a touchdown when they were up 3 touchdowns, it's actually nice to have something to nitpick about as opposed to, this is the reason you lost the game because you were trying to cover AJ Brown with Jalen Thompson. Instead, you're like, hey, you could have only given up 1 touchdown in the game. So, it was just a dominating performance. And I know we're going to get into it shortly, but I feel like it was also an extremely good look at what an ideal scenario looks like for this defense moving forward.
Right, which is as good as that the offense was supposed to be. This defense was dominant. This is a defense that, if everything stays right, is going to be a problem. So just kind of look at some of the numbers. I mean, with that trio of weapons, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Julio Jones. Derrick Henry had 58 rushing yards, 19 of which came on 1 carry. Then combined, Julio Jones and A.J. Brown combined for 7 catches for 79 yards and the 1 touchdown. And so between these 3 dynamic special players, they accounted for, 137 total yards of offense. And
only 1 touchdown.
Right. And then 1 touchdown, and which, if you're looking at a typical offensive production, you're probably expecting, 50 to 75%, or roughly probably 50% of the offense coming through those. And it ended up being about 50% since they only allowed, the Titans only gained 248 yards of offense, and 137 of it came from those 3 players. It was just a good look because they were getting pressure. And my goodness, when we talk about Chandler Jones, we mentioned off the air, 5 sacks. So if he completely flipped the script, so he had 1 sack in 5 games, he had 5 sacks in 1 game so far. And we're at the point here where we're like, 5 sacks after 1 game. If he doesn't get to 20 sacks, I think it's going to be a disappointment, like a barring injury, because Chandler's been, with the Cardinals, roughly a sack a game kind of guy. He's not been one he had some bursts in 2019, but for these other seasons, you typically don't see more than 1 or 2 in a game, and then it's only maybe a game without getting a sack. He looked unblockable. It's funny to hear that Cliff Kingsbury said that he's unblockable in practice. They have to take him out of practice when they want to practice the passing game. I don't know how much that is hyperbole, but if Chandler Jones keeps this up, this is going to be a special year. And the question is, well, should they get him to a contract? I think the Cardinals are playing this kind of right. It's it's cold, but at his age, this is exactly how you want to play it because you can franchise him for another year.
I was gonna say, this dude's getting the franchise tag. I mean, I hate to
and
say it, but
he's not going to be happy here for the next two. Like, he loves his teammates and he loves playing football, but he's going to be unhappy with the Cardinals by the time this is said and done because he's already unhappy with things. And that's just going to how it's be. That's how it's going to be.
Right, and this is one of those situations, and people can, disagree with it or not, but you said it right. They're playing this correctly. They're going to franchise him this year and probably the year after, if he keeps this up. And I know paying a 32 or 3-year-old money, 20, it'll probably be 25, 26 million by that point. Sounds insane, but the other option is letting him go because they're not gonna sign him to a big contract.
No.
And not that they're not going to sign him to a big contract. What they're going to do is they're just going to sign him to 1 year. They're going to franchise him twice. And then at that point, they'll let him go, basically.
Yeah.
Because at that point, he'll be 32, 33, and J.J. Watt will be, gone as well. And they'll be, looking to revamp that side of the ball. And, say what you will. You said it. It's cold. It's not fun, but I have a hard time. I have a hard time feeling bad for somebody that's in line to make about $50 million over the next 2 years.
Right. So the other players, I mean, Kyler Murray played out of his mind, 4 touchdown passes and a rushing touchdown.
It's funny because that interception, I looked at my dad and my brother-in-law who were over, and I said, that was a heat check throw. You know how like 3-point shooters
here's the thing.
Have heat checks?
Why in the world, if you're going to do a heat check, are you throwing it to Demetrius Harris?
Yeah, well, because that's what a heat check is, right? Why do you stop 3 feet past the half court line and just shoot it? Well, because you're feeling yourself, and the funny thing is, he literally just had to walk, and he could have gotten a first down. So I think that tells you where his mindset is with the running thing this year. Yeah. Like he's definitely going to do it if he needs to, but he really, truly has developed as a passer to a really potentially special.
Some of those throws, some of the throws that he made, the cover zero touchdown that he just flicked up into the end zone. DeAndre had a fantastic game. Christian Kirk was, oh my goodness, he was so good. And I was on a show on another podcast, and I talked about, like, if there's one player who it might be a sleeper in terms of your fantasy times, that's going to be Christian Kirk, because he's finally playing the slot, which is what people forgot, that when he was drafted, that's all anyone said he was going to be. And the team was so insistent, no, he can win inside and out. And they only played him outside. He's playing inside now, and he looks like, and we've seen it, but now he's got to keep it up and not get hurt. But he's going to be a big part of this offense. And the way he played on Sunday was just, I don't know how you're going to stop this offense.
Well, and that's what you want to see. I mean, there's definitely going to be a game where they struggle, and even great offenses have struggles. Whether it's Kansas City in their historic runs, what was it, the last couple seasons, where they're scoring 565 points in a season. You go back, and you look. They had games. Remember, they had the game against the Cardinals where they only scored 26, and then they had, losses where they scored 27 and 28, and they just couldn't, find that rhythm. And then you look at that a off week for this team should probably be 24 points, and that's what's exciting.
Right. The other thing is, especially since the defense looks like if the way they're playing, they're not going to be giving up 30-point games.
Right. And that's the one thing, though, is that you have to look at, and the reason the Chiefs, got so much better from their record-setting offensive year to the next year when they won the Super Bowl was because of their defense. A name that we all know, Tyrann Mathieu, shows up. He's accompanied. Uh, he's accompanied by a couple guys, but they went from 20, I think, fourth in the league, giving up just over 26 points a game, to seventh at 19 points a game. So their points per game dropped by 7 a game, but their defensive points allowed dropped by 9 a game, or by 7 a game as well. And that makes a huge difference, because when you can stop teams, that allows your offense mistakes, and when you don't have to play perfect offensive football, it makes winning a lot easier. I mean, we've seen it over and over again. Whether it was the Peyton Manning Broncos, or even the Kansas City Chiefs losing to Tom Brady Patriots, or Kansas City Chiefs losing Tom Brady Buccaneers,
or even like the Seattle Seahawks a year ago.
right? Those teams that don't have a defense that can make plays consistently, they're they can be great offenses, and if they have one bad possession, it can be the change in the game. And so that's what's so exciting to look at. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. They're second in the NFL right now in points at 38. Who scored more? I
San
don't even know
Francisco.
if I'm
They
being
scored 41
Oh, that's
against
right.
the Lions. But technically the
Stupid
offense
49ers.
but the 49ers technically, like 7 of those points, like they had a touchdown that was an interception return. So
and they're third in points against. And if they figure, they're going to set obviously 38, they're not going to average 38 points a game. But if they're averaging 30 to 31, that's going to be phenomenal. And then you look at it, they're averaging 13 points a game given up. If they average 17, and I know 2 touchdowns is a massive, change, but that's about where they want to be, is in that 15 to 17 point per game range. And then it really doesn't matter how good their offense is. If their offense is that good, then we're talking about a truly great team. But right now, when you look at it, nobody expected them, including you and I, to hold this Tennessee team to 13 points. And so that's what the question becomes, is where do they go from here? And they get a Minnesota team that didn't look great, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
And this we've been gushing about, but that was a game to gush about, because there was so little to nitpick about. Like we haven't even talked, like JJ Watt statistically did nothing, but was very dominant, and it was his effect in the lineup was palpable. You could see just how much better Isaiah Simmons was. I say, like, people around the league right now, people who cover the NFL, so we're looking at the play, said Isaiah Simmons looks good. Not just promising, he was great. Jordan Hicks looked reinvigorated. You got a great game from Byron Murphy. Chase Edmonds quietly had over 100 yards of yards from scrimmage between the passing and you look at the offensive split. James Conner got 16 carries. Most of that was down the stretch when they were running the clock down. Chase Edmonds had 16 touches. It was almost perfect. Honestly, it was almost perfect. I wish Hopkins would have had a catch or two more so we could get over that 100-yard mark to get that little feather in his cap for the offense. Would have been nice to get Kyler to 300 passing yards, because a 300-yard 4-touchdown game is something special. I mean, Jameis Winston had 5 touchdown passes on 142 passing yards. That's absurd. But I mean, there's like, you really go up and down the lineup and the individuals who played. It was good, and like there was really, I mean, it was beginning to feel really, for me, heavy. The Cliff Kingsbury hate that his offense, they figured out his offense, that it's garbage. And just look at, and Kyle Odegaard said it, and it's kind of true. As great a player as Larry Fitzgerald has been, the last 2 years, while he added at a different dimension to the offense and a reliability of hands and ability to make big plays when they need to, when you replace him and Andy Isabella with Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk in the slot, it changes the dynamic of the offense because of the speed and the playmaking that you get after the ball is in their hands. And I think it's completely remade what this offense is going to look like.
Yeah, and it's something that we've discussed before, but when you look at it in action, people don't understand that being able to throw the ball horizontally opens up things vertically. And you think about it, I mean, AJ Green had a silly mistake where he just stepped out of bounds on a probably the easiest catch he had on the day, or the easiest opportunity for a catch, and he just didn't know where his feet was or where his feet were. And you look at it from that perspective, and that changes a lot of things. And it's silly to think about this way, but if AJ Green catches that ball, he has 3 receptions for 47-ish yards, because that was about a 22-yard gain. I mean, you're talking then 50 catches for 750 yards on the season is his projection, and right now, it's 34 for whatever, not very many yards, and we get frustrated by that and whatever, but that's what Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk do for your offense, is that they create this horizontal look where now, if you and we talked about this, if you put a linebacker on Rondale Moore,
Good
the Cardinals
night.
the Cardinals are gonna get eight plus yards every play. If you try to cover Rondale Moore or Christian Kirk with the slot receiver, he's gonna get big plays like we've seen, because he's too athletic and quick to do that. He struggled against bigger,
But
more athletic corners.
even 2 years ago, he was getting the number one attention, their top corners, and was still
Right.
producing.
Yeah. And so when you just look at it from those perspectives, you just see, and like you said, Fitz is a great player, and there's nothing, we'll never say anything negative about it. But at the same time, it's one of those situations where it was probably best for the team if he was moving on, or
Especially
they were
when
able to.
this particular offensive scheme.
Right. I mean, he could probably go play in limited snaps in a place like Kansas City, or a place even like Tampa Bay. But again, they're going to be limited snaps. He's not going to be a 90% snap guy anymore.
No.
He just doesn't have that the juice left. Um, and you look at it, this offense is wide open now, and that's
That
going to be
really is.
fun.
That is the whole premise behind that. That is basically the doctrine of Cliff Kingsbury's offense, is that wide open, that speed, and it's what makes it dangerous.
Well, and you look at it, I mean, I thought the rotation at running back was fantastic, being able to use both. They got almost the same amount of carries, but you had that additional use of Chase in the passing game, and he just adds another dimension. And that's the one thing that, going back to the Fitz conversation, when DeAndre got here and Fitz moved down to like year 3, that was much better for the team. And again, you hate to say that, but it just was. But to your point, Christian was still garnering the number 2. AJ Green's going to get the number 2 guy, which means Christian Kirk's getting the number 3, which means he's going to be having a massive season. And then when Rondale Moore's in, if they're in together, Rondale Moore's getting either the 4th guy or
a safety
or
or
safety or a linebacker. And but that's the thing, is when you rotate Rondale and Christian in the slot and they're not playing together, you don't lose anything. And so that's where the biggest difference comes in, is that you're not losing anything by making a rotation. And that's something that we've seen the last couple of years. If you took Kirk out for Fitz, it was, you knew you had to run. You either had to pass block for a while so he could get into his deep routes, or you were going to get a completed short pass for 3 to 4 yards, but you weren't going to get much after the catch.
Right. Coming up next on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I mean, we've been gushing about all the good, but let's talk about some let's nitpick a little bit, talk about some of the negatives, things that we have concerns about from the game. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sea Red. As everyone knows, in Arizona, sports legal is now officially here. Just in the conversation, not just in the conversation I'm having, you see the interaction on Twitter. I was at the ASU game over the weekend, and the conversations I was hearing around me were people talking about the bets that they've made. So legal betting is here. You can now bet on sports. Now, fantasy football itself has added extra juice and more fun to watch in football. Imagine the juice that it adds and how much more exciting it will be when you got some cash on the line. And the best way to do that is with the DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And to get you guys started to celebrate this start, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you a $150 free bet just for signing up. Again, yes, that's a completely free bet. Bonus money. It's not putting any of your money down. It's not a deposit match. Is that you get a free bet of up to $150. I did mine already. I'm going the long play with a nice payout potentially. And after 1 week of the NFL so far with the Cardinals win, I've got some money on the line now for the Cardinals to win the division. There's tons of promotions you can get. So what you need to do, listeners, is you need to download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now, and then sign up and use the code DRYHEAT as the promo when you sign up for an account. And those who sign up right now, you'll get that $150 free bet to use. And you can use it now because betting is already live here. Again, that's DRYHEAT is the code to get a $150 bet free instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. 21 plus, Arizona only. The free bet expires 7 days from the date of issuance. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportbook for details, subject to regulatory licensing requirements. We're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Not everything was perfect. Like we said, it was nearly a perfect game. It might be the best game that we've seen from the Cardinals since 2015 from start to finish. But there wasn't, not everything was perfect. I'm going to talk about one that we have to worry about because we're recording on Tuesday night, so we haven't seen an injury report yet. The Cardinals lost right tackle Kelvin Beachum, which is a mild concern. How concerned are you about that injury? Now, granted, it's a rib injury, so, he's a big offensive lineman. That's different than a leg injury or an ankle injury or a hamstring. It would feel like that's all about pain management.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that you look at and you read into the next matchup, and you hate to do that, but you say, okay, well, Minnesota's good, but are they a team that you definitely need him back for? And if you don't, then you feel like, okay, you take the week, because then the next week you get Jacksonville, and then you're thinking to yourself, well, Jacksonville's definitely not very good, especially along the defensive line. So maybe you're looking at game 4, obviously the Rams game in LA, as his target date. Like you said, it's about his pain tolerance at this point. You want to see where he's at for that. I wouldn't rush him back this week, and that's not a knock on the Vikings at all. It's just a reality. All we heard all season or off season was that this Bengals team made a massive folly in taking Jamar Chase over
Penei Sewell.
Penei
or
Sewell.
any of the other tackles.
And you look at it, and they gave up 5 sacks, but you look at it, only one came from a defensive end. Two were from Michael Pierce, who's a defensive tackle. So, Penei Sewell wasn't going to make a difference in that. One was from a safety blitz, Harrison Smith, and then Nick Vigil had 1 sack. So Danielle Hunter was held mostly in check with 1 sack. Um, I think you feel okay with that being, when you add in the fact you have Kyler Murray, you feel okay. Yeah, we can deal with that. That's something we can deal with. So I wouldn't play him this week or next week. I would want him as healthy as possible for that upcoming game.
Absolutely.
Or that Rams game. I think he's got to be in for the Rams game. That's a game that's going to be of high importance for a lot of people. That's how I would play it. Now, if he's coming to you and he's like, "Hey, 100%, let's just do this," then that's different.
Yeah.
But right now, looking at it, I wouldn't, I wouldn't do it.
The other thing for me that was a concern, and the truth is, after Beacham left, is that Justin Murray played really well. So that's it. Just lends itself to the fact that the Cardinals have depth on their offensive line that they trust. I'm going to talk a little bit more at that with the snap counts and kind of what we talk about the playing time. But the other thing that really, it was hard to see and was very frustrating because the Cardinals spent almost the entire offseason talking about the need for reducing penalties and being more disciplined and what do they go and do, and they have 3 penalties in their first drive, including 2 right in a row in the red zone, and then they added a 4th penalty in the red zone in their second possession. You're going, what is going on? And I'm guessing that part of that might have to do with the type of pace they go, but oh my gosh, it was watching what people were saying on social media about Cliff Kingsbury. Though I will say this, I'm not sure how it's Cliff Kingsbury's fault when Justin Pugh holds or when Darrell Daniels has a false start. I don't understand how that is Cliff Kingsbury's fault because those are guys on the field.
Right, and that's what we talked about a little earlier. He's got to figure out that portion of it. He's got to figure out how to get plays in and groupings in at a faster pace. That being said, the rest of it's not his. That's
the rest
not
of
his
that,
fault.
yeah, and so the penalties were a concern early. Though at the same time, you look at it, the first team offense barely had any work at all in the preseason, and so if you look at the first few plays, that would make sense that they might have a little bit of rust, a little bit of timing issues, even though they work in practice all the time. You could say that is a reasonable thing there. The one other thing for me that stood out is you look at, you looked at how great DeAndre Hopkins looked. You look at how great Christian Kirk looked, and then you go to AJ Green. He had just, you said, you pointed out how had he not stepped out of bounds on that catch, which is that's a mental mistake for a guy of his caliber. He should know where he is on the field. That those numbers look much better, but he did look like the worst receiver on the field for the Cardinals at times, and from what we've seen from him, maybe that was honestly, this was his first game action except for a handful of snaps in the preseason in which there were some timing issues there as well. I feel like he will be much better, but that's the one thing you kind of nitpick at is like he could have done better.
Yeah, he definitely could have done better, and that's one of the things. You look at James Conner. He lacks a burst at times. He's almost too patient. I know that's his running style, but that's one of the things you can look at as well. But again, we're just kind of nitpicking things now because they played so well. Defensively, um, you can nitpick a little bit about their their coverage on the not they're not stars. Chester Rogers had what 60 some odd yards in the game as the leading receiver, but I think most of the time you're like, if Chester Rogers is the guy that beats us, we're going to take that.
Especially
So
when it's not leading to touchdowns.
correct, and so um, I think you could look at you know other things. I don't know, maybe again not shooting yourself in the foot in the red zone. Like if you're going to have those penalties, you don't want them to be in the red zone. Definitely not
I,
that way.
there was one thing, and it I'm sure it cost a few betters on the line because Matt Prater
Yeah, I missed that field goal. Oh
missed
yeah, I
that
had
field goal. Would have
I,
would have
I
hit
had
the over.
I had two friends that literally did lose because of that
And that's something to
miss.
watch. We know that Prater is clutch, but a 43-yard field goal that was the bugaboo range for Zane Gonzalez. So let's keep an eye on that because now in a 25-point win, a missed field goal isn't a concern. The concern is if he misses one that ends up mattering, and that's not necessarily one to tie or win the game, but in a close game, missed kicks matter even when they're not necessarily consequential in the moment. So let's not do that again, Matt Prater.
Right.
I
That's
thought we
a
got rid of Zane Gonzalez.
right, exactly. And so you look at it and you're like, hey dude, let's not do that again. But this was more of a selfish that was more of a selfish one, because you're looking at it from oh man, you cost us some money.
You cost people the over. I said go with the over, and then you kept it from the between that and that extra missed extra point by Tennessee. He's like, well,
Nobody remembers that one now, Jess. All they remember is the last one when Prater missed. But yeah, isn't it fun also to have a game where those are like you're like, well, your number two receiver didn't play
yeah,
great.
he didn't play great, and they missed a field goal when they were up by 25, and they
Yeah,
had penalties early but not late,
yeah.
and it didn't cost
But
them any points.
these are fun conversations to have, as opposed to like, why is Isaiah Simmons sitting on the bench while Devondre Campbell's making all his tackles 9 yards down the field? What's going on?
So with that, we don't have much to say about that. So coming next on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on to our next segment where we'll talk about the snap counts, the playing time, some surprises, and maybe some takeaways from that. That's coming next on Rise of Sea Red. We're back on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. The playing time, the snap counts. Number one, how surprised were you to see Jordan Hicks on the field almost every single snap? In fact, he only sat out 3 snaps, and that was at the very end of the game when they pulled the starters, and that was bonkers.
Yeah, and I think when they talked early about that he was going to be a guy that had a big effect on the game, I think we all assumed that would be in a game like this where it was a heavy run game, but he was in on a lot of passing downs as they pulled away and started to kind of open up. I think that was the more surprising thing, but it does make sense. I mean, coverages are the hardest part for a young linebacker to learn. Um, and you mentioned it at the beginning, Jordan Hicks looks like he's in the best shape he's been in since he was in Arizona. And let's not forget, like, before Jordan Hicks came to Arizona with his leg injuries, he was literally one of the three best cover linebackers in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus. That's what made him, a target for the Cardinals was his ability as a cover man. You and I talked about it off the air. I'm never going to say this is the reason, and so, but I have a hypothesis on Hicks, and it's something I think you can apply to the whole team, and we'll talk about it with all these snap counts. There was a lack of concern about playing time for a lot of these guys, Hicks being one of them. The reality was they just lacked the talent to take a Jordan Hicks, a Devondre Campbell off the field. Um, and so I wonder if maybe he, the motivation, one, the Cardinals allegedly didn't want him. Obviously, we know now that's not true. But that, they took Zaven Collins and he was upset, rightfully so, about that, about how the starting situation was handled. But two, I wonder if the fact that no NFL team wanted him. I mean, literally nobody made an offer for him to come, to go and get him. And he plays an important position. He's a guy that basically everybody knows. They know what they're going to get from him. And yet nobody was really intrigued by him. And so that maybe that motivated him to rededicate himself and to really put himself in a position to be in the best shape of his career coming out here, and that includes being more athletic and being able to make plays in the passing game more consistently. um, Again, this is just me having a hypothesis, but you look at it for the first time, especially on the defensive side of the ball, there's a lot of talent, and those snap counts indicate that, hey, you either are going to play 100% or you're not going to play. And I think that showed in the first game, and not because somebody wasn't playing 100%, but because they have so much talent that a guy like Corey Peters, who feels like he had a massive game. I mean, he had a tackle for loss
He
that
played 15 snaps.
right, and you feel like, wow, he played really well. And then you look at the snap count, and he's like, he only played 15 snaps, and it's just because those were 15 impactful snaps. Rashard Lawrence, the same thing. I mean, he's pushing into the backfield and making Derrick Henry make a cut before he's, you know, at the line of scrimmage, and that's huge for the Cardinals. The only defensive lineman to play over 60% of the snaps was JJ Watt. I mean, JJ Watt, and they were able to limit him on snaps like they wanted to. And you saw how effective he was. Like you said, he didn't have stats, but he commanded double teams on almost every snap he played. Now, to be fair, the Titans have dealt with JJ Watt for a long, long time. But, he commanded double teams on nearly every snap he played, allowing Chandler Jones to have single coverage or single blockers almost the entire game. And now, Taylor Lewan is in coming off a bad injury, and I don't want to understate that, but he even said he got his butt kicked. I mean, he
He
legitimately,
said, I was exposed. Thanks, Chandler. I have to get better.
and I mean, he was. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. He was completely exposed, and I don't think he was exposed as a bad player. I think he was exposed that he's not healthy and he wasn't ready to come back yet. Um, But you look at that, the snap counts tell a story. And I think the story is the depth is a real thing this year. And if they are able to have a deep team where they're able to rotate, especially those front five guys, the three down linemen and the two edge rushers. Chandler Jones only played what, 80% of the snaps?
75.
75, yeah. So I mean, and he was the only edge rusher to play that much. Like, they were able to completely keep guys fresh going into the fourth quarter. And I don't think that can be understated for how important it is for everybody, including when you look at the secondary and in coverage and those type of things.
Absolutely. So what we saw is, and they kind of played a little switcheroo on us because all off season, we were led to believe that Zaven Collins would be like the signal caller on the defense, would be on the field exclusively, that he would never come out, and that Jordan Hicks would have these special packages when they basically go with a 4-3 look, or if they give Isaiah Simmons kind of an edge to give them B. So he's essentially like the outside linebacker opposite Jones. But it turned out that Zaven was the sub guy. Now, he did start. He played, 34 snaps. But he was a sub guy. But we kind of felt that was probably going to be, like, right after he was drafted, before the news came out that Jordan Hicks was told he's not going to be able to compete for the starting job. That is going to be Zaven's. And that's how Zaven operated all offseason and all through training camp and all through the preseason. But we felt that it would make sense for him to start in passing scenarios in nickel downs to take advantage of his coverage skills. And he had some work in the run. But the truth is, what he did is, I think the plan is what they kind of had envisioned for Isaiah Simmons for a year ago, but it just didn't work out because he didn't get the reps in the offseason and he made some mistakes. But the snaps that he was out there, he looked really good. And I think this is kind of the best case scenario. He's not playing as much as we anticipated, but it looks like he doesn't have the responsibility of calling the defense yet. And he's being put in situations to succeed. So it was ultimately a largely positive experience for Zaven, who got in, who was downhill, athletic. He was where he needed to be. He didn't look lost.
Yeah, and that was, again, where you see this maturation process come in. I mean, you talk about Hicks' athleticism kind of peeking back in. You talk about Isaiah Simmons looking like the guy that was drafted 8th overall, and not the rookie that's running the wrong way in routes against, Raheem Mostert. And then you have Zaven Collins, and they're able to put him in a position to be successful early. And I think, to your point, that's one of the things that they haven't been able to do. And that goes back to the conversation about the depth and the fact that they have some depth now. And so they're able to do things like that with a guy like Zaven Collins, instead of saying, and I know they wanted to, and probably ideally they were going to have him in the Jordan Hicks role. And he just may not be ready yet. And that's okay, because they put him in a position where he was, according to Pro Football Focus, the best rookie linebacker this week. And he played the least amount of snaps from the sense of those other guys that were playing. And in that case, that's a good start, and that's something to be excited about, because overall he's going to be the future Mike. And so if he's able just to start as the guy that's coming in and being put in a situation to be effective and have a good outcome, I think everybody looks at that as a win-win.
Absolutely. An interesting thing, I didn't catch it during the game. Marco Wilson is not only their third cornerback, he's their number 2 cornerback. He was the one, so Robert Alford was the one who came in sub packages. Obviously, Byron Murphy still slid into the slot, but Robert Alford was the one who subbed in, not Marco Wilson. Marco Wilson and Byron Murphy were on the field, all but a handful. So whenever they had, with the exception of when they brought in Antonio Hamilton at the end of the game and had Robert Alford play the last 3 snaps, goodness. That is how, if you notice how they handled Zaven, that's the opposite of how they handled Marco Wilson, is that he has ascended. He's their number 2 cornerback, and I'm all for it. And the way he played showed that you can trust him right now. There's going to be inconsistencies. I'm sure there will be at some point. There will be mistakes, but this is not the Brandon Williams scenario, because Brandon Williams was benched like the second drive into game 2 of the 2016 season, and Marco Wilson looked good out there. He was physical. He broke up a pass. He wasn't overwhelmed by playing Julio Jones. It was fantastic to see.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, a lot of people disagreed with our hypothesis about, Malcolm Butler being the number 3 corner, or maybe even the number 4 corner on the roster. And you can disagree, and if you still do, but the reality is that they really, really like what they have in Marco Wilson. I don't think you and I thought they liked him this much to be the starter, but we knew he was going to be the number 3 at least and be the one coming off the bench. And clearly they see him as the number 2 right now. We'll see how long that is. They go up against a really talented, receiving duo this weekend. Kirk Cousins put up a huge game throwing the football. They just struggle to score touchdowns, and so that's going to be one of those situations where you're going to get to see it immediately. Like there's no day off. They don't get the Jaguars next week. It's the Vikings and 2 guys that have Pro Bowl, All Pro ability.
That's absolutely it. And then the other thing I want to point out is and I wrote about it on Tuesday as well, is that the Cardinals continue to, because they have guys on the bench on the offensive line that they trust, at least at the guard positions, continue to create just a touch of competition there and allow their starters to get a breather now and then. And they rotated in. So Brian Winters came in and played 13 snaps, and Josh Jones, who won the starting job, came out for a little bit. Justin Murray subbed in for Justin Pugh for 3 snaps. But if we look at like 20, this is a Cliff Kingsbury, Sean Kugler thing. Is if you have guys that you trust on the bench, you're rewarding them with playing time. They did it with Mason Cole in 2019 when he would, towards the second half of the season, he would sub in for all 3 interior positions and give their starters kind of a breather, which with those veteran players made them fresher and gave Cole in some extra work. Last year it was Justin Murray who would sub in for J.R. Sweezy and a little bit for Justin Pugh until ultimately he took over the starting job. But they're doing it again. So Justin Murray subs in a little bit at left guard, Brian Winters for right guard. It gives them a little bit of playing time. It shows that the coaches trust them. It creates a little competition so that the starters don't get complacent. That's changed a little bit with Kelvin Beachum out, potentially, because I think that Justin Murray will end up starting there, which means it'll just be Brian Winters subbing out. But I think it's an interesting concept because that wasn't something, with the exception of like one game under Bruce Arians when Eric Winston and Bobby Massey subbed in and out for one game. I've not really seen that by any Cardinals team other than for injury. They wouldn't just rotate periodically offensive linemen, which is appear to be what they will do, at least with those 2 guard positions.
Yeah, and I think they really like what they have, and in that we're seeing that play out that way. Josh Jones, like you said, he came out before the injury, and that meant they wanted to see Justin Murray a little bit, and then Murray plays right tackle, and I don't know. I saw Justin Pugh miss 3 snaps. I didn't catch what happened.
I think it was the case that did, because Josh Jones played 56 snaps, which was 13 less than the total, and Brian Winters played 13 snaps. I think that I didn't catch the rotation. I'm pretty sure it was Murray that came in for 3 snaps for Pugh. Then he would have done more over the course of the game had Murray not played right tackle.
Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah, because I didn't see exactly what happened to him. So, but yeah, I mean, so you look at it, and There, it's one of those things. Again, obviously, rotational depth's a lot different along the offensive line, but I think they're comfortable with what they have in terms of Murray, Jones, and Winters, in the fact that they've got a guy or two guys that they feel comfortable at right tackle. And then they've got three guys that they feel comfortable with at either guard position. And let's be honest, they love Max Garcia. Now, he is nowhere near Rodney Hudson. So let's, get that out of the way. But they feel comfortable if they had to go to him for a series or a game. And that makes a huge difference because again, rotational depth is a lot different along the offensive line because you don't want to get them out of sync. But if it's a play or two, a series, or like it was for Beecham, what was it, about three series, four series? Um, and you feel like you're not going to miss a step with that, that's huge.
It is, absolutely. Coming up next on the Rise Up C Red podcast, special our Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let us wrap up the show, but this is an important segment as we talk about the Cardinals Week 2 matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. That's coming up next on Rise Up C Red. We're back on the Rise Up C Red podcast, special our Cardinals Talk on the Web. And the Cardinals face the Minnesota Vikings, a team that struggled last year defensively. They have no problems offensively. So it is the second week in a row that they will face a dynamic offensive team. They, in Dalvin Cook, have the number 2 running back from last year. He was number 2 to Derrick Henry in both rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. Between Justin Jefferson, who was a fantastic player last season, as a rookie, had a fantastic season at receiver. They have Adam Thielen inside. Both are dynamic. And so you look at the first 2 weeks of the season and Kirk Cousins, who, while you say what you want to say about what his limitations are, he is productive. The problems that Minnesota had last year had nothing to do with their offense. It was all about the defensive side of the ball. So the Cardinals' defense will once again be tested in the same manner as they were expected to be tested in Week 1 against Tennessee, only this time it's Dalvin Cook. Instead of Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Julio Jones, it's Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, and Justin Jefferson. And then you add in, the other weapons that they have on their team. How do you see their offense matching up with the Cardinals' defense this week?
It's interesting because they struggled defensively against the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Bengals are a good team. I don't want to take anything away from the Bengals, but when you look at what they bring, I was a bit surprised to see them lose to the Bengals. I was texting some of my friends, and I am interested to see what the leash looks like for Mike Zimmer because they look positively mediocre. And that's not a bad thing if you're the, second year Arizona Cardinals last year. It's not a bad thing if you're the, year 2 of the Zach Taylor era Cincinnati Bengals, or, year 2 with Joe Burrow. But to be in year, I think 6 or 7 with Mike Zimmer, to have spent all the money, this is year 8 of Mike Zimmer. Holy cow. To have spent all the money that they spent, they're coming off a 7-9 season. It feels like their defense has really taken steps back since they were the best defense in the NFL, in 2016, 2017, and they've gotten progressively worse each year. And then their offense has really just never clicked under Kirk Cousins. You said it best. They put up a lot of great numbers. They just, when it comes to points, they just don't put up consistent points, or they get, cheap points at the end that make their overall numbers look better. They've got talent though, man. I mean, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson they're a phenomenal receiving group. Dalvin Cook is one of the better running backs in the NFL. They are going to be, just from that standpoint, they're going to be, tough to stop. But when you look at the team, they tend to go the way that Kirk Cousins goes. And Cousins last game, 351 yards, 2 touchdowns. Um, but he missed a lot of throws at important times, and they weren't able to do things um, at times when it mattered, if that kind of makes sense. And you look at it, they scored early. They took the lead at 7-0. Then they got down 21-7. And I think that's where you're concerned if you're the Vikings. This is game 2 on the road. Your division looks like it's not very good. And every team in that division's 0-1, I believe. And I think that the Mike Zimmer shine and the way he coaches has kind of worn off. Now, I don't want to jinx it, because obviously you don't want to see them come in and just play a efficient game and get, run the Cardinals out of the stadium. But at the same time, it feels like the Cardinals are the better team coming into this game.
It does feel like that, at least, especially in the mentality that the Cardinals are playing with right now. It's, I think after how things fell apart last year, and they've said it, I think they believed they were a playoff team, but didn't keep preparing like a playoff team. And I don't think that's going to be a problem this year. Kyler Murray hates to lose, and he said he's not going to let the offense get complacent. So I think this this could be a really fun year to watch. And obviously the kind of the premier player that we get to talk about now is the Patrick Peterson comes back. But we know that Patrick Peterson is not the Patrick Peterson of old. He's simply an old Patrick Peterson. And plus, now there's that clip that's out on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen it, where Jamar Chase for the Bengals totally just completes him, turns it around, makes a move. He turns his hip and ends up turning the wrong way. Chase didn't get thrown the ball, but he was wide open down in the middle of the field. And, I think whether he has to guard DeAndre Hopkins, that's bad news for him, or AJ Green.
I'm going to put money that he's on AJ Green.
and I think he will probably, he might win more than he loses against AJ, but they might not need that, because if they're taking away the guy that's going to have less production, that leaves guys open like Hopkins. Now they're going to have to give safety help over there, and then Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore. But my guess is that Green will be all right against him. He moves better than Patrick still. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. Patrick has lost something, and while he does have some good high moments, as we saw last year, his bad is pretty bad now.
Yeah, and you look at it, it's definitely a matchup that should favor the Cardinals in a lot of ways. From they have a really good pass rusher in Danielle Hunter, but you feel like DJ Humphries especially will do a good job with that. When you look at the wide receiver position, as you said, you feel really strongly that the Cardinals match up extremely well across the board, and so we'll see how this turns out this week.
The part that's going to be fun to see, Chandler Jones against Rashad Hill. He's not exactly a household name. What he did to Taylor Lewan, that's going to be really fun to see. If the pass rush is as even nearly as effective as it was, the play at the point of attack, if it's even close to what it was against the Titans, I think we could see another Titans type game, because offensively, Minnesota can explode, but I don't think they have the horses on defense to keep up with the Cardinals' offense. So it'll be coming down to how many plays do the Cardinals make defensively, and if they make them early, you're going to put pressure on Kirk Cousins to have to make plays. And when he has to make plays, he doesn't have the reputation as being a guy overall his career who can make plays when he has to.
Right, and that's the big thing. And so when you look at it, they've got the advantage. It feels like in a lot of positions. You feel good about Byron Murphy matchup, whether it's on Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen. They've got to bring, they've got to continue to bring that pressure. You brought it up. When you look at the weakness on the Vikings team is their offensive line. In fact, it's probably terrible. I mean, that's probably a fair way to put it. Um, and that plays into what the Cardinals do well, and that's get upfield, penetrate, and attack the quarterback. If they're able to do that again, it it could be a long day for this. It could be a long day for the Minnesota Vikings. When you look at the fact that you've got Jones and Watt who are still playing at a high level, and then you are able to rotate, a guy in like Robert Alford who played a very nice game in his first game. Um, this is a team that should win this game, and that's always what the scary thing is for the Cardinals, is it not?
Right? Is
When you start getting into the should.
right, and we talked about this. Is I believe this team has a Super Bowl ceiling. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And we saw how good they could be last week. If everything's clicking on that defensive front, which will help the coverage, and I think the offense has kind of found its place with its personnel. You know, they avoid turnovers. This is a team that can go as far as anyone. Win the Super Bowl, I don't know, because the AFC has some really good teams, but this is a team that could go all the way if it plays to its potential. That's the thing that has me excited about this team, and it's will they. And here's the fun thing: the Cardinals. I put this out on Twitter as kind of a joke on Saturday to say, hey, I forgot. Cliff Kingsbury, they're undefeated under Cliff Kingsbury in week one. It's like, oh, come on. Guess what? They went out last year and beat the NFC championship, the NFC champion on the road in week one. They go on the road this year and beat the AFC South champ, one of the top three offenses in the league, and they completely shut them down. And so let's have that follow up. Let's have the follow up at the home against another team that has high hopes. But maybe they don't have what it takes. I want to see it, and I want to see it happen again. I'm okay if there's more points. Like if the Vikings score more points, as long as the Cardinals are still just able to continue to do offensively what they did against Tennessee, because I don't think Minnesota's defense is much better.
Correct. And that's where I think, you want to see the efficiency. You don't want them to get over their skates, so to speak, in week two, because they're going to be pumped up with their first home game. The crowd's going to be back in full force. You want them to stay within themselves and really just execute like they did, and let the fans be excited about seeing that, and not try to do too much. And I think if they do that, it's going to create a frenzy, because they've got a really good chance to start out on a very high note and make that Los Angeles Rams game, which is 3 games away, make that a really important game early in the season. And that's what all you want. You want these games to matter, and not be about their playoff life, but to be about where they are in terms of what are considered the elite teams in the NFL. And the Rams are getting, elite conversation. And so you want to take care of teams like Minnesota and like Jacksonville, and have a really good opportunity to set yourself up against the elite teams. And And it starts this weekend. It truly does. It starts this weekend by showing that week one was not a fluke, and instead it's kind of it's the best of what's yet to come.
Right. In terms of predictions, I don't think it will be as much of a blowout, but I do expect the Cardinals to do some of the same things. When I wrote my preview for USA Today Sports Weekly, so I wrote that Sunday afternoon, I had them winning the game as my prediction was 31-19 victory over the Vikings. If I'm thinking about it now, I'm it's going to be a tad closer. I'm going to say 31-24. I think that's kind of a reasonable place, or even we go 30 to 24 or 31 to 24. Either way, it's going to be Minnesota will put up more of a fight. I think the Cardinals will get out to an early lead, and the Vikings will rally more than Tennessee did, but ultimately fall short.
Yeah, and I think something similar. I think it's going to be about 35-27 Arizona Cardinals win.
Whew. This is a fun time to talk about the Cardinals. So much better than what we've had when things were falling apart. So thank everyone for listening to this episode. We will be back again next week talking about hopefully what is a 2-0 Cardinals team heading into week 3 to play Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. His momentum begins to build. Hopefully that's what we're doing, and hopefully not when we are going through the roller coaster of what the Cardinals did to us last year, the last couple of years, where they're good. Oh, wait, now they're not good. Oh, they're good again. No, they're not good again. So with that, this is the end of episode 324. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. We'll be back again next week. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise Up Red Sea, Be Red See Red, and of course, Rise Up See Red.